Hey, welcome back to Pagitt Radio. It's the April 18th edition, and we're going to have a conversation with my dear friend and Victoria, soon to be your dear friend,
I can't wait.
Shauna Niequist. Shauna is the author of the book Bread and Wine, with its snappy little subtitle, A Love Letter to Life Around the Table with Recipes. Shauna Niequist,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, so proud of you and excited to talk with you today.
Thank you.
Shauna, you have done it yet again. Have written a blockbuster of a book.
Thank you.
So I should tell. I don't know, Shauna, if you've ever met Victoria Lim, but
Hi,
Victoria
Shauna.
is our is the sidekick here on the show, and
Hi,
she's
how are you?
she's part of the literati as well. She's a published poet
Make
and
it
is
sound like
going off to
people who take
Lithuania or
pictures
something.
of literature.
She's a big deal.
people.
And you have written this great book called Bread and Wine: A Love Letter to Life Around the Table with Recipes. And I do want to talk about that at the end. So congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you were hoping to do with Bread and Wine.
Well, when I look back at some of the most moving, profound, sacred, wonderful moments of the last couple of years in my life, they've largely happened around the table. I love to eat. I love to feed people. I love to cook, and I think some of the things that we expect to happen, I don't know, in church or when we're reading good theology, I think some of those things also happen around the table, and I think it's worth talking about and worth valuing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and can I push you even a little more on that? I think that maybe you're suggesting by life and this book that not only can you do it around the table, that there might be some things that you perhaps can only do around the table.
Absolutely. I think we have tended to overvalue right thinking and undervalue kind of the tactile, messy, feel it, taste it, smell it parts of our lives, but it's how we were created. And so I think really valuable things happen in our lives when we invest ourselves deeply in the world at hand, not just making sure our thinking is kind of organized in the right direction.
And Shauna, you've been thinking about these things for a long time, haven't you? Like it's not like you had to come up with a new blockbuster book. So you said, hey, maybe I'll do some things about the role of food and table and community and eating together. This has really been shaping for you, and you've been thinking about this a long time.
Oh yeah, this is my deal, and it's just especially fun that I actually got to write about it. But this is not a topic I chose. This is the way that I live. And actually there's a story in the book, and I don't think I mentioned you by name this time, but you were around our table eating chicken curry right when we moved to Grand Rapids. That was almost 10 years ago.
I remember.
And this is a way of living that's important to me, whether or not I write about it.
Yeah. Well, do you think that that if you had been, say, at a church where like there was really good teaching from the front, that would have been different for you? Do you think maybe you just experienced a lack of positive leadership and teaching in your life growing up, so you've had to revert to the table?
I think mostly leadership is what's been missing.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, you've had the privilege of being a part of a very well done and exceptional church culture in your life. And have sat under and you yourself are an exceptional teacher of people from like standing on a stage and helping people understand things. You've been led in that world and are really quite accomplished at it yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So it's like because sometimes people think, well, the reason folks develop another viewpoint on how spirituality can happen is because they didn't have a good version of the thing that they want to extend beyond, right? And I think in your case, it might be you had such a great version of that it allowed you to extend beyond it.
Well, and I would say my version of church, the way my actual family and friends live, these things happen together. One of the best parts of my life right now is that I don't actually work at my church.
Yeah.
So I get to have lots of dinner parties with the people who do work there. So like they have to be in meetings with agendas, and they have to wear like dress pants.
Yeah.
And then we live right near the church, as you know. And so then they can come over straight from work, and I can hand them a glass, slice some bread and make some soup and say like, great, that part of your day is over. Now let's continue our church life around around our table. And for me, I feel so thankful that my church community doesn't just happen in that building and doesn't just happen in meetings, but it happens in the kind of intimate, honest, daily way we live together.
Well, talk a little bit about the title. Were you able to pick it, or was this the work of the fine marketing people?
Oh no, absolutely, I picked it. I think. Originally I thought that I would explore the themes of communion a little bit more than I ended up doing. I would say communion is a light theme, but the book is by no means like an exploration of the Eucharist. It's sort of about taking that sacrament out of the church and into our homes, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Have you had any pushback on those ideas from people where they would say, look, communion is a sacred, special thing, but has to happen inside of a certain construct, and it has to be the word aptly preached by someone who's been set apart by a community and then led by that person. That's fairly common in Christian understanding about the role of communion, and you've made it a more accessible, broad, and democratic expression of that. In your years of thinking about these things, did you feel yourself being pushed by people on those other ideas?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, I would say I'm you know me, and you know that I'm not trying to change the way we do it in church. I'm just trying to broaden the way we do it on the whole. And specifically for, I come from a church tradition that's not super uptight about communion.
Right.
So like the fact that we would administer communion on a student retreat at a campground, or we would, a small group could have communion together in their living room. That's not unheard of in the tradition that I grew up in. But certainly I absolutely respect some of the parameters of, say, the Catholic Eucharist that are much more kind of codified and formal. I totally get that. I would also go back to the original Last Supper and say, I don't think those were wafers and little plastic cups. Like, I think that was an actual meal. And I'm not detracting from that experience in church. I have great memories of both administering and receiving communion in a church context. I just also think that the fact that it was a meal says something about not just how we should behave in our sanctuaries, but also how we should behave around our actual tables.
I like that a lot. How about the subtitle? The subtitle, the book is Bread and Wine, and the subtitle is A Love Letter to Life Around the Table with Recipes.
So we had a totally different subtitle all the way through. And that was more of like, I asked everybody at my publisher, I asked all my friends, like, what do we do? How does this subtitle make you feel? Better this or this? Do you like this word or this? Do you like the word friendship or community? Do you like this? Blah, 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 blah. And then the day before I was turning the final edits in, so like the cover had been made, it was on Amazon, we were very far down this road. I called my editor and was like, hi, I think you're going to murder me, but I have a question. And she was like, you know what? You know what's terrible about this is that you're totally right. And it's so much better a subtitle that we're going to have to go through all the rigmarole to change it because you're right.
What was it before then? What was the bad subtitle?
Oh, I mean, it was just like finding community and life around the table. It was just sort of
a little more generic.
Yeah. And what I realized, and I think this is what a good subtitle is supposed to be, is when someone says, you're sitting next to someone on a plane and they say, oh, you wrote a book. What's it called? It's called Bread and Wine. What's it about? And what I would say is it's like a love letter to life around the table, and it has recipes in it. Yeah. So if that's the thing that you say to the dude in 22A, that's the thing that it should say on the cover.
And it looks like for every chapter you have a recipe. So how did it's like there's what money can't buy and then cookies. So what was that like to pair up these? Did it come naturally? Putting together recipes with the ideas, or how did that work?
Some did, and then a couple we just struggled like crazy. We did tell ourselves there doesn't need to be a recipe for every chapter, so it wasn't like just arbitrarily there just has to be one. But there were a couple spots, frankly, where we felt like we should have a recipe, and I just absolutely could not come up with one. And I felt a little bit like I'm not generally a purist, but on this I kind of said like, if I don't make this in my regular life, I don't want to put it in the book. Like, I want these to only be the recipes that like really are a part of my story. So there's a chapter called Cupcake in the Oven. It's one of my favorite chapters, and it's about a baby shower and a friend whose mom was sick, and how a lot of friendship is getting it wrong and then making it right along the way. But the title of it is Cupcake in the Oven. And so it just is begging for a cupcake recipe, but I never make cupcakes ever. Like, I'm a terrible baker, and my girlfriends are like, I do the main course and they do the cupcakes. And so then I got in my head, well, okay, it would be authentic to me if it was a gluten-free cupcake, because everyone eats gluten-free. And so then I basically spent like $100,000 on a high-end, whatever kind of gluten-free flour, and tried to make 68 batches of horrible cupcakes. And at a certain point I called Carolyn. I was like, Carolyn, I'm out. I can't make these cupcakes. I can't put it in the book. Like, we are going to publish a book with a chapter called Cupcake in the Oven, and there is no
of all the things to not have.
Yeah, I had to admit defeat. Like, the cupcake beat me, and there's the recipe.
Yeah. So, Shauna, I think that I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I feel like we were driving in a car or chatting or something, and I was lamenting about how books that I've written and that others I've read, like, they're meaningful at like this idea stage, but it would be really good if they were also meaningful like to your daily life. And wouldn't it be fun to like have recipes in there? Was that a conversation I had with you by any chance? Do you remember that?
I think it probably was, maybe when we were in Minneapolis.
And I've never had the guts to do it. Like, boy, wouldn't it be great if someone said,
well, Doug, you don't cook.
I read this. Well, that's true. But it didn't matter. Like, I was just in the theory. I was like in the theory of, sometimes you read a book, then you put it away, and then it's kind of done. But if it had recipes in it, that would be such a great idea. And I've never even had the guts to suspect that someone would actually put cooking recipes inside their book. And I think it's genius.
Author of this, that you want some sort of credit for
I
this?
Don't. No, unless somewhere deep in your conscience you want to share the revenue with me. No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is I thought it was a great idea, but I was too gutless to ever try it. And then you just said, you know what? I'm going to put recipes in this book as well. And I think that's genius. I think there's something genius about that in this book that gets well beyond like the idea of having something useful in it. Because I think what you are wanting to say is you actually have to make this stuff. Like, you're going to read this book about these real experiences that people have, and it's an essay style book. So you can read these essays, and then you can actually do something. Like, you should and could make something, and the recipe is the hint or the encouragement or the push to make something. And maybe it's a meal or a food item, but it seems like you're also saying to people by having the recipes in there, like, get busy cooking on the kind of life you want to have.
Yeah, and some of it's just practical. Bittersweet has a lot of food details in it, and I get kind of a lot of emails from people saying like, wait a minute, you talk about this meal. How do you make that? How do you make that? But really, you're exactly right. I don't just want people to observe these stories. I really do want actual human people to stand up in their actual human kitchens and with a knife and a cutting board. Like, I that's the point of it. And I've been really surprised. We've been getting reviews and messages from people and stuff. And the ones that say like, oh, the writing is, really good or this, that, I love those. But I have been, I'm not kidding you, absolutely moved to tears when people send messages with like a photograph, like, I made vinaigrette for the first time in my whole life.
Wow.
Like, I went to the store and I bought ingredients I never had. And, I baked a loaf of bread, and look at my bread. I think because I learned kind of along the way, the hard way, making a lot of mistakes and stuff. The fact that actual people are actually trying the recipes, and that they have now they have jars of vinaigrette on their countertops, it makes me so happy.
Oh, I think that's really